Hi, and welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, co-hosted by Abby Thiering, the Badass Breastfeeder, and Dianne Cassidy, IBCLC.
Hey, and welcome to episode 14 of the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is the third week of nursing in public. So what are we doing this week, Abby?
We are talking about family support and the law.
It's my favorite.
Yeah. So the family support is, that's a really big thing for a lot of women. Cause it's like people want, I'm sorry, my little nursing in public breastfeeder is right here.
Hi.
Hi. A lot of women really want to do it, to breastfeed in public and be able to just breastfeed on demand. Okay, go see grandma. But sometimes if even if they're not nervous about it or they're kind of really wanting to work on it, they'll have their family might be like, oh, you can't do that. You know, anything from like a partner who's like, no, I will not allow you to show your breasts in public to like grandparents who are like, oh, that's, you shouldn't do that. There's all kinds of ways that people show their unsupport.
And again, it's just because it's not normalized.
That's right.
It's just not normalized. And we were talking about this a lot in my breastfeeding support group this week. This was kind of a hot topic. And it was funny because we have one mom who will walk around and just like, she's like, I don't care where I am and what I do. I will breastfeed all the time. And another mom that was like, I just started being okay with not leaving the room when people come over. She's like, I just started being okay with that. So now that I'm at that point, hopefully like I can get, like she's kind of working her way in. And then we have another mom that was like, I was uncomfortable even just with you guys, and our little, and it was a breastfeeding support group. And she was like, I was uncomfortable with that at first, but now I'm better with that. And it's just, everybody has their own feel about it. And it really family makes a huge difference. The people that you are most comfortable with in your life, if they say they're uncomfortable with it, how are you supposed to be uncomfortable going out into the world?
I know. Yeah, it's true. And I hear a lot of people say that they feel more nervous around their family than they do total strangers.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it kind of makes sense in a weird way, It's very strange. And I remember when I had Jack was, I don't know, a few months old, and we took this cloth diaper class at this this like kind of attachment parenting focused like baby boutique here in Chicago, which doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So there was this lady talking to us about cloth diapers and how you take care of them and how you use them and all that stuff. And I was breastfeeding Jack, and this woman was sitting across from me, a pregnant woman, and whatever, she was in the class. Okay, so months go by. I start the blog, and it starts to get kind of known, and she is like commenting on something, and she's like, "Oh my God, I was wondering why you looked so familiar. You were in a cloth diaper class with me.
Oh my gosh.
And you were sitting across from me and you were breastfeeding your baby, and it blew my mind." She's like, I couldn't even I can't even put it into words, but like you were just sitting there and you were just breastfeeding, and like I couldn't believe it. Like I could never really imagine how I could just sit somewhere in public and just breastfeed. And like I saw you do it, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. And like everything changed for her just seeing someone else do it.
It's amazing. And
so again, this is what we talk about when we talk about that it's not normalized. It's like you can't even picture yourself doing something you've never seen anyone do.
Right.
I can't really picture myself skydiving, but I've seen people skydive, and I'm like, oh my God, I could bring my mind into this crazy like skydiving situation. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm never going to do that. But I could still like imagine it a bit. But it's like there's these things that you don't ever see. You can't imagine doing it. So, yeah, I mean, I just think it's, and then here's the, then we're really what we're talking about is family support. And my husband was always just kind of like, I mean, my husband's always kind of like, huh, whatever.
Yeah.
Huh? So like, he never, I mean, I think when I was pregnant with Jack one time, my mom was like, oh, you should get like a little nursing cover, for when you're, at the restaurant or whatever that they go to all the time. And I was like, huh? Okay. So then that got in my head and I was like, oh, I got to use a nursing cover. And then I was using a nursing cover. It was like such a terrible experience. It was so uncomfortable and awkward. And all I was doing was drawing all this attention to myself. But if that's what, if that makes you comfortable, then absolutely do that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that they were talking about in the group was like, is I run the group with a doula and with a postpartum doula. And she was saying how, like the covers just attract more attention. Like if you're just holding your baby, like the one mom in our group was just like standing, rocking her baby and he happened to be lashed to the breast. But it was like, you couldn't even tell that that's where he was. Like it was enough that it just looked like she was holding him. And like, but if she had a whole blanket, drawn across her and everything and just the feet are kicking out and it's obvious, it's totally obvious.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people who say like, oh, I was breastfeeding, talking to my uncle and, I talked to him for 30 minutes before I even noticed I was breastfeeding. So families that are unsupportive, well, there's a few different things going on here. And I think we automatically want to be like, well, you can't, especially to a partner or something that's like, I'm not comfortable with it. I don't want you taking your breast out. If we could just for a second look at it from their perspective, because I'm a social worker and I'm annoying like that. So this always comes from a place of concern. I wouldn't say always. This usually comes from a place of concern where a partner is very aware of the society that we live in, aware a woman's body is totally sexualized, that, they've been in plenty of locker rooms where, all anybody could talk about are the boobs. And so they're imagining, other people's reaction to it, a fear maybe of you being harassed or a fear of people, sexualizing you or something. So, I think that when it comes to these kinds of things, it's like, it's important to understand that they're worried. It might not be coming across like that. Maybe it's coming across as like, they're being like a real jerk about it. And that's, then you can, deal with it however you see fit. But if they're really coming from a place of fear for you, then that's like a starting point for a conversation, of, how important this is to you and how, this is important to your baby and how, I mean, a lot of times if people are just talking about what makes them nervous and what they're worried about, that alleviates some of the worry. But we get stuck in this like situation where we're not really communicating, and it's like people are just, especially the new parenthood, because everyone's freaking out. And now there's like all this now there's a new thing to freak out about, breastfeeding in public. Right. And so then, I think it's really important for people to sit down and start and to have a conversation with it. And don't expect to have a conversation about it. And then at the end of it, everyone's going to see your point, because wouldn't that be awesome?
Oh, it would be fantastic.
But it's not going to happen that way. It might be a series of conversations with your partner about, how this is about, your ownership of your own body, you and your, their child, wanting the best for their child, and how important it is to you.
And if it's a family member, I mean, that could be even just a situation where, if it's a mom or an aunt or a, grandma, whatever, that when they had their children, it was even more not seen, not known. Right. No one did it. So maybe they don't realize how things have changed, how laws have changed, how, it's a little bit more accepted than it was even 10 years ago. And they might still be stuck in a different time zone where it's just, no, you can't do that. It's not allowed here, and that's not how it is anymore.
Right. Right.
Family support is really a big deal. And I think you kind of have a really good point when you're saying that having the conversations about it, I think is really important.
Yeah. And there's, having the conversation. First of all, you have to decide who this family member is. I think for me, it's like deciding who this family member is and how much value, how much value is their opinion? If it's a partner, if it's a parent of the child, if you're living with this person, that's, you don't want it to be a point of contention. You want to work it out. Like you work out any other parenting disagreement. This doesn't have to be anything beyond, another parenting decision that you're going to work through. If it's like Aunt Sally, who is just like harping off about everybody at the family reunion, well, then maybe you tell her that that thank you for your opinion, but I didn't ask.
Right.
Or I don't, you don't have to, family members are a special group of people, because you don't ask for them. They're the ones they're the ones that you're born with. And, that you also can't get rid of them. So, you can't just say like, well, I guess you can. I guess people cut ties with their family, all the time, and that happens. But, a lot of people don't want to do that. And you can just, a certain person, maybe just their opinion doesn't matter.
Right. Now, depending on your personality and your family member's personality, sometimes you can use that whole thing as an educational time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, just even do the whole, well, what bothers you about it? I mean, I definitely suggest to do that. Like if it's your partner who says, I'm really uncomfortable with you breastfeeding in public, I want you to go to the car. Like that definitely, instead of just saying, okay, I'll do that and go to the car. I mean, I would definitely have a conversation about it and be like, what is it that makes you so uncomfortable? Because that's important to do because you're just going to get resentful later on.
Right.
So
exactly.
You need to have that conversation. But if it's Aunt Sally, I would definitely do what is it that you're so afraid of, Aunt Sally? Yeah. And, kind of go from there because it would really be an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah. I mean, people are going to bring up maybe they'll bring up, well, it's just not ladylike, or you should be more modest, or you should be more classy. I mean, just, God, all these words, I can't stand these words. I hate them so much. And, whatever. Questioning people and educating them is awesome. What also works sometimes is the smile and the nod.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If you're not a confrontational type of person and you don't want to get into it, if that makes you really, if that gives you a stomach ache, then, just, okay, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. You don't have to get into it with them if you don't want to.
And now, if you are listening right now and you are pregnant and thinking, I don't think I could ever breastfeed in public, it's not worth it for me to have this conversation with somebody in advance. I mean, I have met moms who thought they would never breastfeed in public and then they have their baby and it's like, this is what my baby needs right now. So I'm going to have to suck it up. Like we've talked about this before on the podcast. The whole mentality changes when you have a baby. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt to even have that conversation ahead of time so that you're not out in a restaurant having an argument.
Right.
Right.
Well, and a lot of people also think like, well, it's no big deal. I'll just go to the car or I'll just go to the bathroom or something. And then, you're going to have a baby and you're going to realize that that's, first of all, going to the bathroom is disgusting. You're not going to want to breastfeed in the bathroom. And going to the car is like, you're removing yourself from society. You have a right, as much of a right as anybody else, to be there. You don't have to remove yourself if you don't want to. Right. I mean, again, you can if you want to, but you don't have to interrupt your day. And, when you're actually doing it, when you're actually faced with breastfeeding in public, maybe you're feeling nervous about it, you might find yourself you thought going to the car would be okay. And then you might feel like, wait a minute, why should I have to go to the car? I don't want to go to the car. Or you didn't take the car. You took the bus and you're in a park and there is nowhere to go and your baby's crying and your baby is hungry. And here you go. You're about to have your first breastfeeding in public experience without even really planning on it.
Right. And maybe sometimes that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I get. Yeah,
you don't really have time to think about it. You just need to do it.
Yeah,
I cannot remember the exact like situation or the exact post, but I'm thinking it must have been on Facebook or something where somebody had actually compared breastfeeding in public to urinating in public.
Oh yeah, they do that all the time.
And I was like, I couldn't even respond because it's such a ridiculous, ridiculous thing. It's like, that is not.
I know. I think we live in a world where people don't see breastfeeding as like actually taking care of your child. You know, it's like a mother taking care of her child. We don't see it that way. People see it as this gross thing. Look at the baby is sucking on the mom's boob. That's not what they're for. They should be, you know, tucked away in a bra for only the husband to see. Like that's, you know, this is what people think.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone, but a lot of people feel this way. And so, you know, people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that in public. I might as well just show my penis in public. You know, and they don't understand, you know, people don't understand that, well, actually breasts aren't sex organs. They're actually not at all. And
it's
there's no reason for, and you know, you know, this guy can walk all the guys on the beach can walk all day with their boobs hanging out when really there's no difference between women's boobs are bigger. Sometimes,
not always.
But they're perfect. They're comparable. They're not sex organs. They're things, they're nipples on your chest that feed babies.
Right. That's their main function. That is the main function of the breast.
Yeah. But this is why people have such like, you know, they get so queasy about breastfeeding in public because it's like, I can't believe, you know, that she's doing that with those things. How can she let the baby be on those things?
Right.
That's just, and they compare it, you know, it's like, well, then it looks like a, you know, some sort of sexual act, which is just sad.
And that drives me crazy too. That's, yeah.
So this is you know, when you have all of these things that you see on the internet and you know, hear on the news, because we always hear about, you know, you hear about women being harassed and that kind of thing. You know, this, you know, we think, well, those are just crazy people, and they are, you know, that's fine. But they also, these thoughts are coming from inside people's heads. And so, you know, your family members also see all of this and they're like, oh my God, I can't have, you know, my daughter or my wife or whatever associated with all of this. And so they're like, no, just don't do it. You can't do it. I don't want you to do it.
But that is when somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I'm sorry, you can't breastfeed here. That is coming out of their own issue. Like that is not, that has no weight at all in the real world. Like that comes out of their own issue. And you're right. People will look at that and go, oh yeah, now nobody should be doing that. Or somebody's going to say something to you. Why do you want to put yourself out there like that? So nobody can do it. Let's all just hide. And we need to bring it out.
Yeah, it all comes down to normalizing, because the more people see it, the more it's not going to seem weird, and the more people are just not going to harp about it. You know, it's going to become a non-issue.
Exactly.
And then we won't have a podcast anymore.
I know, but everybody will miss us, and they'll beg us.
But that would be right. Let's have them talk about other things.
I know. I can talk about things I have no idea about at all.
Right. So the other thing that comes along with this, because we did talk about, you know, being harassed and all of this, and this is where people often say, well, what about the law? Like, what is you know, I looked up my state, and I don't have all the states here in front of me, but you can go on, there's a website called breastfeedinglaw.com, and it is awesome. It's got every single thing that you need to know about federal law, like which covers like pumping and workplace pumping law. And there's state laws. You can go through each state and see what the laws are in your state. And the thing that I like about this, because people will say, well, I looked at my state. I think there's only a couple states now that don't have actual written breastfeeding laws. And people will say, well, my state doesn't have a breastfeeding law, so it's illegal here. And this, my friends, is not true. Breastfeeding is not illegal. There are states who have not taken their time to, you know, put down that breastfeeding So here's the laws, generally what states will write about. They'll say something like, they'll say something like, why does this keep clicking away from me? They'll say something like, breastfeeding does not constitute an act of indecent exposure. So they're going to make a distinction. Most of them make a distinction that breastfeeding is not, running down the street topless, which, by the way, it's not allowed in a lot of states, which is, again, completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something about workplace pumping law, although that's covered by federal, so maybe not. But so when you're looking at these laws, the important thing to remember is that, thank you for taking the time to make these laws. However, they are not that useful.
No.
Because none of them involve an enforcement provision. And so people are like, what? What's that? Okay, well, let me tell you what that is. An enforcement provision means a lack of an enforcement provision means that there's nothing you can do when the law that the state has taken the time to write is violated, is broken. So, somebody's harassing you, you can't be here, you're indecent, I'm calling the police, you need to leave my establishment. Okay, that violates that law that says that you're allowed to breastfeed. Okay, another law that you see a lot in states is that a woman is allowed to breastfeed anywhere that she is otherwise allowed to be.
Right.
So, hey, you can't be in my restaurant if you're breastfeeding. Well, you're breaking that law that the state says that they have, except that there's no enforcement provision. So you have nothing that you can do about the law that was broken, which deems that law pretty useless.
True.
So, not to say I don't want to scare people from breastfeeding in public, because breastfeeding in public is perfectly legal everywhere in this country. Whatever your states say or not, breastfeeding is not. There are no laws that say breastfeeding is illegal anywhere.
No.
It's legal everywhere. And the more, these laws will come into shape and these incidents will stop happening the more that breastfeeding in public happens.
Now, there was a situation a couple of years ago in Virginia where a woman was told she couldn't breastfeed in her gym. I believe it was Gold's Gym. Mm-hmm. And Best for Babes did a thing on it, and I actually wrote a blog on it for Best for Babes. But it was a privately owned facility. Mm-hmm. And some states will say a mother can breastfeed wherever she is in a public place. But if it's a privately owned establishment, that person that owns it can make their own rules. Well,
that's discrimination, that's against the law.
It is.
And so these people can say this if they want, and you can hire a lawyer and sue them for harassment.
And well, they got the law changed. This girl went and fought and got the law changed.
Do that. Actually, do that.
So
do that
which
instead.
Is fantastic. But it's ridiculous that we have to go to that extreme.
And you know what? Here's the bottom line. Don't take that from anyone.
No.
Do not take it. If something happens to you along those lines, write to me, thebadassbreastfeeder@gmail.com, and I'll blow up your story. Mm-hmm. Because I'm sick and tired of hearing about these things. These people think that they can just make up their own laws. Well, I don't want black people here either. Well, this is a privately owned establishment, so I can make my own rules. Do you see a hole in that logic? That is not true. It's discrimination, and discrimination is illegal. Yeah. So these people are going to say all kinds of things to you. Reach out to the media, reach out to a lawyer. The media works fine. Write me an email, because I am the media and I will help you.
Now, the other thing is that I have found that people don't know what the laws around breastfeeding are. And they are just saying to you, oh, you can't breastfeed here, because they really think that that's true. So try not to feel like you're just being this, this horrible, bitchy person that wants to have her own way. You need to educate that person. You need to educate them. And I have found that here, so now in New York State, we have very, very, very liberal New York breastfeeding laws in New York State.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are like, you can breastfeed in jail in New York State. You can take, if you're in jail, you're incarcerated, you can bring your baby with you and breastfeed if you're a breastfeeding mom. Like it is very,
Good.
but I mentioned that once. I know some jail deputies and I mentioned that to them and they were like, there's no way that's true. And I'm like, look it up. They are the police. And they were
I know. No, this is the thing. The
true.
police, more than anybody else, do not know the laws. They are there to enforce the law. But look, these people cannot know every single law. It's just not humanly possible for them to know every single law. They should educate themselves before they confront somebody. But they oftentimes, and these times have been in the news as well, that they are approaching people saying that they are breaking the law and they are not.
So it's really important to know, like, and if you are traveling to a different state, know what the breastfeeding laws, just in case you need to have that in your back pocket.
I print them out, put them on my wallet.
Yeah. I mean, it does not hurt to have it because if somebody says something to you, then you can say, this is a case. And I don't see it happen very much. I know it does, but I don't see it happen all that much with, breastfeeding in public, but I see it happen a lot with the workplace.
Yeah. Oh God, the workplace situation is out of control. That might have to be a whole separate episode.
It's going to have to be an episode, but I will say, and we'll because whatever we say now, we'll just repeat it whenever we do that episode. But I will say that I'm almost positive that California does enforce that breastfeeding in the workplace law, and they fine the businesses. I'm almost positive. Like I have to look it up to be sure, but I remember hearing that somewhere else and looking it up once before, and California actually will hold people accountable. Whereas most places do not. Like you were saying, there is no accountability for these laws, and that's why people get away with not doing it. So
and the workplace pumping law is a federal law.
Right.
So that, I don't know what the deal is with the enforcement provision of that, but I would imagine there would be more of one.
Well, and the situation
of one, I don't.
that we came into here in New York with, which other states will come into this too. And again, we'll have to do a show on this, but New York State had its own breastfeeding in the workplace laws that were put on our records back in 2007. And people don't know that, but that law, our law from 2007 is better than the federal law. So the workplace has to comply with the New York State law, but they don't realize that there is a New York State law. So they just go by the federal law, which is not as good. So I have to tell people no, they're not following the right law. They have to follow this law over here, which is better than this law over here.
Yeah. Right.
So it's really good to educate yourself on what goes on in your state and it's all different. Like they're all different. So, which is another thing that's ridiculous. We should just all breastfeed wherever we want to go and nobody should say anything.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. The bottom line now, breastfeed wherever you want. Yeah. And if someone's got a problem with it, you tell them to call me. Or you call me.
Yeah.
Just call me.
Somebody call you. And I heard even people saying, what about at school? What about at college?
Oh, that's very lacking. Those laws are very, very lacking.
And I'm like, I don't know. I kind of figure you know what? That's your job right now. So that's what we're going to say.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. You breastfeed wherever you want to be. You pump wherever you need to be. And really it's somebody else's problem. And it's so easy for us to sit here on a big high horse and say that, but it just bothers me when anybody tells a woman they can't do something.
I know. Perfectly legal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So breastfeed in public.
Please breastfeed in public so that everybody will get used to seeing
You're making it easier for everyone who comes after you when you breastfeed in public.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really, and you're feeding your baby. You're giving your baby what they need. So, it's just try to do what you need to do to feel comfortable with it. Ask questions, be around your mamas that are already comfortable with it. Surround yourself with good people.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Good.
But we would love to hear feedback. We would love to hear yours. And if you have a really great, if you have some great tips that we haven't talked about, or if you have, some words of wisdom or some words of encouragement that you want to share, definitely reach out to us. We'll put it out there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, we want your questions. It gives us stuff to talk about.
Yeah. And this is always a hot topic. So, definitely reach out to us for this. But next episode, we are going to talk about nursing aversions. So quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite thing. Then we're out here going breastfeed, breastfeed, and then we're
right.
aversions coming out right behind it.
Like,
so
stop.
So we will catch you next week.
Bye.
Bye.